So if we remember when we're looking at our questions, when we're looking at passages, this is a humanities passage, it's a history-driven passage. We want to make sure that we're remembering what's important. So we're reading for the reasoning structure. We want to see how the author builds the argument. We're also, looking for any examples, any evidence. We want to just kind of make sure we fit the pieces together of our argument. We're also looking for important people who have some thoughts, who make some contributions. The author is either going to talk about their contributions or talk about their thoughts and opinions, or the author is going to compare themselves and their own opinions to those people. So we want to keep track of people because they do and think things that are important. And then in history passages like the one we have today, sometimes it's helpful to build a timeline, because if we build our timeline, what we start to see is that we focus in on a certain place in history, and then we go ahead and look at the impact of this person's contributions or what this person has done. Or what we might do is go back into time and see what happened before that person came, what makes them so important based off of the context. Okay, so we'll just kind of go ahead and like skim through this paragraph really quickly, and then we'll kind of pick out some important pieces from it. Okay, and if you already read this passage, I want you to like definitely chime in and talk about what you found important here. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. We'll go ahead and put our thumbnails on the side. Okay, well, we'll just hide the thumbnail. All right, so most scholars of Mexican American history mark Cesar Chavez's unionizing efforts among Mexican and Mexican American farm laborers in California as the beginning of the Chicano political activism in the 1960s. So what's going on here? So far, what we're focusing on are the scholars. The scholars have an opinion, and what they do is they mark the unionizing efforts as the beginning of political activism for the Chicanos. So we're already starting to get to, there's this starting point that scholars recognize in the 1960s. And this is among farm laborers in California. There's a lot of extra information here that we don't necessarily need. It's not the most important, but we do know that there's a starting point from these scholars. They have an opinion about what the beginning of this activism is. By 1965, Chavez's United Farm Workers Union gained an international recognition by initiating a worldwide boycott of grapes. Interesting. In an effort to get growers in California to sign union contracts. So what they did is they had a boycott by 1965. So this is really what starts to happen. They gave us a claim in that first sentence, and then they get more specific on what the claim is doing. They're boycotting grapes because they want union contracts signed. So the year 1965 also marks the birth of contemporary Chicano theater, for that is the year Luis Valdez approached Chavez about using theater to organize farm workers. So now they're starting to build this reasoning of why 1965 is so important. And that's the birth of contemporary Chicano theater. And then we see this new person, Luis Valdez. Valdez and the members of the resulting Teatro Campesino are generally credited by scholars as having initiated the Chicano theater movement, a movement that would reach its apex in the 1970s. So we know that this theater movement goes from 1965 to 1970. And then, they're credited as having started the movement. So in 1965, we have this boycott and political activism. There's also this theater going on. And they're trying to think about how do we use theater to organize farm workers, right? So right now, what this paragraph is doing is it's giving us context. We're getting a lot of context here about what this author wants to talk about. They're talking about the importance of 1965. How are we feeling so far about this one? Feeling good? Feeling bad? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Awesome. Awesome. So does anyone have any observations about this paragraph so far? Any questions?
I just see it's creating a timeline of, I guess, like things to come. That's basically what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. And we can kind of plot it out really quick too at the top of the page. So, well, this is, excuse my inability to draw a straight line. So we got 1965, all this exciting stuff is happening. This is like the big year that they're centering in on. Up until this point, we've got some political activism brewing with Cesar Chavez. And then in 65, we also get this theater movement. And the theater movement is growing up until the 70s. And that's the apex. So the apex is like a mountaintop. So we've got theater that's just going to kind of go, and it's just going to go onward. We're assuming that it's still present. um, but this is like the birth. So I guess if we had to give ourselves a couple of keywords for paragraph one, we might say 1965, we might say political activism, um, we might mention Chavez and Louis Valdez. There's a bunch of things that we could center in on here. This like paragraph is functioning as our context. All right, so now we're going to jump right into paragraph two. It's a long one, but we'll get right into it. So in the fall of 1965, Valdez gathered a group of striking farm workers and asked them to talk about their working conditions. So it looks like right now, paragraph one gave us our broad context, all the things that are important between, the political activism and the theater starting to integrate together. And now they're zooming all the way in and thinking about what happened, what's the sequence. So Valdez is asking them about working conditions. A former farm worker himself, Valdez was no stranger to the players in the daily drama that was field work. So it looks like they're going to start to get more into, what is his experience with field work. He asked people to illustrate what happened on picket lines, and the less timid in the audience delighted in acting out their ridicule of the strikebreakers. So now the author is starting to tell us a story. How did this happen, and how did Valdez get to this theater? Using the farm workers' basic improvisations, Valdez guided the group towards the creation of what he termed actos, skits or sketches whose roots scholars have traced to various sources that had influenced Valdez as a student and as a member of the San Francisco mime troupe. Well, I know if they're going to mention mimes, it's going to be in paragraph two. So what he's doing is he's talking to the workers. They're real people, they're real workers, they're doing real work. Um, and he's taking what they do in this this really fun kind of space, and he's making these skits and sketches. Um, and they say the roots, our scholars show up again. They've traced the sketches and look at the various sources that had influenced him as a kid or as a student and a member of the mime troupe. It's so random, mimes. Expanding beyond the initial setting of flatbed truck stages at the field's edges. So they're talking about the flatbed trucks that are on the fields, when you're doing field work. The acto became the quintessential form of Chicano theater in the 1960s. So this is, they're starting to show where this work that he did in working with the people, figuring out what their experiences were in the fields, this became, what like this defined and formed Chicano theater. According to Valdez, so we've got some opinion here, the actor should suggest a solution to the problems exposed in brief comic statement. And as with any good political theater, it should satirize the opposition and inspire the audience to social action. So we could get really into the weeds here, but what's going on is Valdez is saying what the actors should do, and should is a pretty strong comment. So we can expect that since he's got an opinion about what constitutes the acto, we might want to think about where this is. This is in paragraph two. So if we get a question on it, we'll go right back there. It should satirize the opposition, inspire the audience, social action. Got it. Because actos were based on participants' personal experiences, they had palpable immediacy. So that sounds like a really complex phrase. They're saying that, it's linking to people's real experiences, and they were tangible, and it was current. So what's going on here is that the paragraph one talked about the broadly why 1965 was important. We had farm laborers striking with Cesar Chavez, and then we have, Valdez and the theater movement. Paragraph 2, they zoom in on Valdez and see what is so important. What is his process? What happened? And then they also talk about Chicano theater movement like being defined. How does Valdez define it? And why was it so personal to people? How are we doing with this paragraph? Any questions? No? Okie dokie. We'll just roll on. Oh, did I see something in the chat? All right. Sounds good. Good, 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 good. All right. So now we're going to go and look at this last paragraph. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of think about how does this paragraph um, fit with the other paragraphs so far. All righty. So in her book, El Teatro Campesino, Yolanda Broyes Gonzalez, we got, this new person in here who wrote a book, and she rightly criticizes theater historians for having tended to credit Valdez individually with inventing actos as a genre. So we got a criticism. So we can get a sense that, there might be a question on this. Our author hasn't really given us any opinion so far, but we have some pretty opinionated people in our passage. So she thinks that, she's criticizing rightly. Okay, I guess rightly means that the author agrees. She rightly criticizes theater historians for having tended to credit Valdez individually with inventing actos as a genre, as if the striking farm workers' improvisational talent had depended entirely on his vision and expertise for the form it took. So she's not a bone to pick with this guy. She says, it's not him individually because he didn't tell them how to act. He didn't give them the talent. The workers did it themselves. So it seems like she's going to go ahead and say that it's a group effort. She traces especially the actos connections to a similar genre of informal, often satirical shows known as carpas that were performed in tents to mainly working class audiences. So she basically is saying that, there's another genre that was, informal and often satirical, just like the actos. And so, she may try to say that this is actually inspired or it connects more so, or other people were familiar with that genre. Carpas had flourished earlier in the 20th century in the border area of Mexico and the United States. So now they're giving us a history of the carpas. Many participants in the formation of the teatro no doubt had substantial cultural links to this tradition and likely adapted it into their improvisations. So this is exactly what we thought. Um, there's another reason why they, we have to think about if these people had the carpas in their background and now someone's approaching them to create theater and they create this whole genre. Now she's saying, wait, we can't consider Valdez to be the sole inventor of this new actos, because the people who are generating all these improvisations that are participating, they probably were inspired by this and put it in there, so they're more related than we think. The early development of the Teatro Campesino was in fact a collective accomplishment. And this is what she was saying earlier. She's like, it wasn't Valdez alone or individually in line 42. It was everyone. Still, Valdez's artistic contribution was a crucial one, for the resulting actos were neither carpas nor theater in the European tradition of Valdez's academic training, but a distinctive genre with connections to both. So she's not throwing him entirely under the bus. She's saying, he did contribute. But we have to acknowledge that this is a contribution, a collective accomplishment. I really like that term in 55 and 56. And Valdez was critical to it. So what they've done, paragraph 1 gives us our context with Cesar Chavez and this guy Valdez and how he came in 1965 and introduced theater. Paragraph 2 kind of zooms way in on Valdez, gets to his methods and what he did, how he created this genre. And then in this third paragraph, we have a criticism that says, wait, he didn't solely create this. Let's not get it twisted. He actually collaborated with all these people who were likely inspired by this other type of theater. And so, we have to make sure we don't credit him alone, but we acknowledge that this was a collective accomplishment. So that might be our keyword for paragraph 3. How are we doing with this? Are we feeling good? Any questions? Any confusion? How do we feel about this paragraph?
I have a question about the European tradition. So I'm assuming that's about the San Francisco mime troupe. So they're saying that Valdez brought his like experience, like in paragraph two, from the San Francisco mime troupe. He used that as well the what is the actos that or actos is a combination of his experience with like the European style and then as well as this kind of style of bringing in improvisation about the farm strikes together.
Right. So the Actos is looking at the skits and sketches from the from the farm workers and their improvisations. And then I guess, rather than the mime troupe influencing Valdez, there's sources that influenced Valdez as a student and when he became a member of the mime troupe. So we can guess that the mime troupe and being a student were later. Or that they have similar influences, but the mime troupe didn't influence, these actos.
Okay.
Nice. So we'll go ahead and just kind of move on to our questions. Um, and we'll see how many we can get through. And I'm happy to hang around after class if we don't get through all of these. Just that way we can work through these. All right. So which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? And I can put this up I'll put the entire thing up here. So it's asking what is the main point of the passage? So what is the author's takeaway? And you can put your answers in the chat if you want. You can come off mute. I think we're quiet. We're waking up today. So all right, what do we think? What do we think? Are we between anything? We got a couple answers. All right. Okay, so let's work through this. So we got a lot of you said C. Some of you were between C and E. Some people picked E. So let's kind of work through really quickly what's going on in these choices. So A, some theater historians have begun to challenge the once widely accepted view that in creating the Teatro Campesino, Valdez was largely uninfluenced by earlier historical forms. So we're not really talking about Valdez and his influence in theater, right? So very good job. Nobody picked A. B, in crediting Valdez with founding the Chicano theater movement, theater historians have neglected the role of Cesar Chavez in its early development. Well, they're not trying to lobby for Cesar Chavez here. He makes a brief appearance in paragraph 1 to contextualize the farm workers. C, although the creation of the early material of the Teatro Campesino was a collective accomplishment, we do recognize that from paragraph 3, Valdez's efforts and expertise were essential factors in determining the form it took. So this one is looking like a really good answer choice because ultimately the author gave us context in paragraph 1, explained Valdez in paragraph 2, and then made their take-home point in paragraph 3. So we'll go ahead and look at the other answer choices just to be sure. But so far we're liking C. D, the success of the early Teatro Campesino depended on the special insights and talents of the amateur performers who were recruited by Valdez to participate in creating actos. Nobody picked this one. And that's good. That's very, very good. Because we're not talking about the success of it. We're not really talking about the special insights and talents of amateur performers. We don't care how successful it was. It's just completely out of scope here. Then E, although as Broyles Gonzalez has pointed out, the Teatro Campesino was a collective endeavor. Valdez's political and academic connections helped bring it to recognition. So we bring in Yolanda at the end to get a perspective that helps the author make the take-home point that it was a collective accomplishment. So the author is not trying to argue that Valdez was the most important. They do say he is important to the contribution, but it's a collective accomplishment, and that's really the author's main point. So it's not going to be E, and we'll go with C. Very nice work on this one. Any questions before we move on? Alrighty. 14. The author uses the word.
What was the answer?
C. The answer was C.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Good. All right. 14. The author uses the word immediacy in line 39, most likely in order to express what? So if we look at what's going on in line 39, because actos were based on participants' personal experiences, they had palpable immediacy. And we'll just give it a quick chat because I know we might have to switch soon. We're going to get through as many of these as we can, and then I'm also happy to stay afterward if people want to chat or to make some videos on this too. Alrighty. We've got a mix of answers going on in our chat. All right, so a couple of you are thinking, I think it's C, but I don't know if I like it. All right, so let's look at C first, because we're thinking it's a trap here. Okay, so number 14. The ease with which the Teatro Campesino members were able to develop as actos based on their own experiences. So we're not really talking about ease because they said that these are based on personal experiences. They were palpable. They had palpable immediacy, and so we're looking at palpable means that you can touch it, or it's concrete, and immediacy means that it's immediate. It's current, it's relevant. And so we're looking for something that's talking about like it's relatable to the people. And that's because it's based on personal experience, right? So with C, ease in being able to develop it, this is not really focusing on the people and their experiences, even though it does say it's based on the experiences. We're really focused on, is it making sense to them? Is it connecting? On A, how little physical distance there were between performances. We're not really talking about physical distances, and they're hoping that you get that from the word palpable. B, the sense of intimacy created by performers' technique of addressing many of their lines directly to the audience. So intimacy, this is a good trap. It is a really good trap, but we're not talking about the performers' techniques here. And we don't really talk about addressing their lines to the audience. This is about how this relates to the performers. Oh, we got some changing answers in the chat. I see you. D, how closely the director and performers work together to build a repertoire of actos. Again, we're not really concerned about how they work together and to build a repertoire. It's all about the actors themselves and how this connects. E is going to be our right answer. So very good job on this. Y'all jumping ship. How vividly the actos conveyed the performers' experiences to their audiences. This is exactly right, because it's based on personal experience. We can feel how important, like all the intimate, relationships and experiences that are being conveyed. Very good job with this one. This is hard. These line references try to get you.
Wait, so D wasn't because it said the director and performers? Because
Right.
that's between D and E, so it says how closely the directors and performers. Okay.
Right.
Okay, I see
Yeah.
now.
It's not about really building the repertoire. palpable immediacy means like it like that weight of it holds to the person listening because they see their experiences reflected.
Okay, thank you.
All right. 15. The second sentence of the passage functions primarily in which of the following ways? So we'll go right up and look at it really quickly. Second sentence. So that would be by 1965, Chavez's farm union workers gained international recognition by initiating a worldwide boycott of grapes to get growers in California to sign union contracts. Now this looks pretty random, but if we remember, our first sentence is talking about scholars talking about the unionizing efforts being very important to activism, and then they explain what happened in the 60s, right? So we're going to look for something that helps us to understand what's going on with these unionizing efforts. And then it gives us a place for Louis Valdez to come in 1965 as well, and to link up with Chavez, if we remember. So we're going to look for an answer choice that helps us to get there. All right, we got a couple of votes for A. All righty. So let's think about it. Most of you said A. Oh, I'm excited. So the second passage helps explain both the motivation of those who developed the first actos and an important aspect of their subject matter. So this is really good because if we remember that, the theater came about because we're able to connect with the farm laborers and we're understanding why they're striking, why there's activism going on. This is looking like a pretty good answer. So we'll kind of, pin it for now and come back. B introduces a major obstacle Valdez had to overcome in gaining public acceptance. This is not really talking about Valdez at all yet, right? They're talking about Chavez and what Chavez is organizing. And then Valdez came and linked up with Chavez. C, and it anticipates and counters a possible objection. What possible objection? What is it countering? We can just stop right there because it doesn't do that. D, it provides an example of the type of topic on which scholars of Mexican American history have typically focused to the exclusion of theater history. So don't really say that scholars are focusing in on it and excluding theater history. This is just getting really clear on what's happening in 1965. E, it helps explain why theater historians in their discussion of Valdez have often treated him as though he were individually responsible for inventing actos as a genre. So they don't talk about that at all in the passage. And we know that this would probably come up later in paragraph 3 if they decided to keep building on. So A is the best answer choice here. Any questions on that? No? All right. So we'll go ahead and look at 16. We're just rolling through these. Look at that. 16. The passage indicates that the early actos of the Teatro Campesino and the Carpas were similar. Why? This is where the mime troupe comes back to haunt us. All right. So we've got a couple of answers. We're a little bit all over the board on this one. All right, we've said a little bit of every answer choice. So looks like we'll go through all of these. So A, both had roots in theater in the European tradition. So they actually don't say that the Karpas had roots in the theater tradition, even though the Actos, we know that Valdez was he had the training that was from the European tradition. It doesn't really mention the Karpas being from the European tradition. For the resulting Actos were neither Karpas nor theater of the European tradition of Valdez academic training. So they hope that you saw that line and read it a little too quickly and recognized it. But that European tradition, we just don't have enough evidence to say they are steeped in it. B, both were studied by the San Francisco Mime Troupe. So they do mention the Mime Troupe, but the Mime Troupe was coming from a different time than the Teatro Campesino. So these Actos and Carpas. The Carpas were, way, way beyond our time. It's possible that the Mime Troupe looked at them, but we don't know who was in the Mime Troupe. They just don't talk about the Mime Troupe enough. So it's not going to be B. C, both were initially performed on farms. Now this one is interesting. We don't necessarily say that it's performed on farms, but they are inspired by farms. And that's what I think that's in paragraph 2. We get this idea of flatbed trucks, if I remember, expanding beyond the initial setting of truck stages at the field's edges. So they're being really tricky here because it wasn't technically in the field, it was on the edges of the field on flatbed truck stages. So people are performing on their flatbed trucks. So they're not performed on the farms. And we might interpret farms to mean fields. I might hold on to this answer choice just to be certain, but we don't know about the carpas. The carpas, when they're talked about in paragraph 3, it says they were in the border area. There's cultural links. It doesn't mention where those were performed. So I'm inclined not to pick this one for now. D, both often involve satire. This is directly stated in the passage. They do mention that in paragraph 2 with the actos and paragraph 3 with the satire. So if we look at the carpas were often satirical shows. And then back in paragraph 2, where did it go? I know we talk about satire here. Okay, so according to Valdez, the acto should suggest a solution and it should satirize the opposition. All right. Then if we look at, E, both were part of union organizing drives. We know the actos were part of the union organizing, but the carpas was coming from way before. All right, so we know people were inspired by this, it was from their roots and origin, but we didn't necessarily have them in the organizing drives. They don't give us that information. How are we feeling about this question?
Feeling good about it.
Good.
Looking back at the paragraph, I was between 3 answers, but I was really strong on D.
Good. Good. And trust your gut choice. If you get down to it and you've got a gut answer and you're not sure, the more that you linger on it, the more hold that these wrong answer choices have. This test is designed by psychologists in part. And they know that if they can get you to pause and second guess yourself, you're more likely to pick the wrong answer. So go with that gut choice. Worst comes to worst. Pick your gut choice. All right. Well, let's look at 17. We've got about 10 more minutes I just got from the chat. So I guess everyone else is ready behind too. So number 17, it can be inferred from the passage that Valdez most likely held which one of the following views. So if we kind of just think back to ourselves, what did Valdez believe? He did have some beliefs on the actos, and that was in paragraph 2. He said what actos should be. He was kind of defining it for us. Otherwise, we didn't really have very much opinion from Valdez. We had opinions from Yolanda in paragraph 3. So we can kind of think about all of these. We got some quick answer choices in here. It's exciting. It's exciting. So Nikki, Malika, and Lisa all agree, and they were super, super quick to get to this. Does one of you want to explain how you got to your answer?
I'll explain.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Um, because it was impromptu, they had no theater training or anything. I thought that Valdez, because of what they were going through, these farm workers, he believed that they didn't require any formal training in order to convey, what it was that they were going through at the time. Um, so that's why I picked that answer choice.
Good. You picked D. And that's
'Cause
very
he didn't pick professionals, he just, he just saw them and based on the audience, you know,
Mhm.
um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And you're right. If we think about what they said in paragraph 2, he just talked to people and then based off of their basic improvisations. He was just like, I just want to learn and see what you do. And I want to make art out of it because art is going to get us to the future goal. Um, and it helps us relate to what we said earlier, the palpable immediacy, the personal experiences, right? So if we think about these other choices, we just want to make sure why we know they're wrong. So as a theatrical model, the corpus of the early 20th century will ill-suited to the type of theater. Well, we don't know that he talks about the corpus, and he definitely doesn't say they're ill-suited. He doesn't even mention it. They come up in paragraph 3 when Yolanda is talking about them and their impact. B, Cesar Chavez, okay, our buddy from paragraph 1, should have done more to support the efforts of the Teatro Campesino to use theater to organize striking farm workers. Well, he doesn't really give an opinion about Cesar Chavez, and that's some pretty strong language. And if we know the only strong language that was there came up in paragraph 2 about what the actives should be, then we can eliminate anything with strong language here. C, avant-garde theater in the European tradition is largely irrelevant. That's a pretty strong opinion right there. But he doesn't give any input on European theater because that comes up in paragraph 3, and that's when Yolanda is telling us that he was educated in the European tradition. But Valdez himself does not give an opinion here. D is our answer. And then E, the aesthetic aspects of a theatrical work should be evaluated independently of political ramifications. Well, we don't know what he thinks about the aesthetic aspects, but we would have more evidence because we know he thinks it should give a solution and that it's satirical. Those are mentioned in paragraph 2. We can infer that he actually would disagree with E. We know, and to approach somebody who's doing political work and saying use theater for politics, yeah, we probably think he loves the political aspect of it as well. Any questions on that one? Alrighty, we'll see if we can get through these last 3 in the couple minutes we have left before Nicole shuffles us. 18, based on the passage, it can be concluded that the author and Broyles Gonzalez hold essentially the same attitude. So the author and Yolanda over here hold the same attitude about what? Lisa says this one was difficult. Definitely, they our author does a really good job of remaining neutral for pretty much the whole passage, right? Teasing through what answer each answer was actually saying. Yep, 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 yep. It's difficult. It's difficult. All right, so it looks like we've got quite a few votes for C, quite a few votes for E. So let's think about this. We've got some A, C, B. Those are our popular ones. So we didn't like B, motives of theater historians, exaggerating the originality of Valdez. They don't completely discount him, so they don't say that the historians are exaggerating, or and they don't talk about their motives, right? So good job. Nobody picked B. And D, the extent of Valdez's acquaintance with Carpas as a dramatic form. Yeah, we don't know if he knew about it. They kind of don't talk about that at all. So good. Now we're down to A, C, and E. So A, the influences that shaped Karpas as a dramatic genre. Well, they don't really talk about the influences and the influences of Karpas. And you know, they what they do say is that Karpas shaped the actos. So they're hoping that you get confused between the two forms that we're talking about in this passage. We look at C, the significance of Karpas for the development of the genre of the acto. They both agree, the author, so Yolanda's over here saying, you know, these are important. Let's not forget people probably knew about these things and incorporated it into their understanding. And the author says, if we remember, he says that her criticism, right, is coming, it's rightly a criticism. So we want to remember what's going on there. So C is probably going to be our answer. We'll just double check with E to make sure. The role of European tradition in shaping Valdez's contribution to the development of the actos. If we remember what's said about the European tradition, you know, the resulting actos were neither Karpas nor theater in the European tradition. So they don't really talk about how important it was for shaping the contribution. They just say that, you know, he was trained in that way, but they don't give anything else. They kind of leave us hanging there. Although that's a really compelling answer choice to trip us up. Any questions there? Alrighty. Two more. Let's see what we can do here. The information in the passage most strongly supports which one of the following statements regarding the Teatro Campesino. So this is one where it's going to be really helpful to know where to look. So we're trying to remember paragraph 1 is our outline of the background. Paragraph 2 is talking about Valdez. And paragraph 3 is giving them some nuance from Yolanda, where she's saying it's a collective achievement. How are we doing with this one? It looks like oh, all the answers came in at once. Is this one is tricky? Yeah. So let's kind of think about this. The information most strongly supports. And what's tricky about these is that there's only one strongly supported answer. Everything else we have to draw extra information in. So A, it's efforts to organize farm workers, eventually won acceptance of few farm owners. We have no idea. That's outside of the scope of the information they gave us in paragraph 1. B, it included among its members a number of individuals who, like Valdez, had previously belonged to the San Francisco Mine Troupe. I love this mine troupe thing. It's coming up a lot. They're hoping you get it, but we don't have enough information about the mine troupe. As far as we know, Valdez was the only one. I mean, can't be that common. C, it did not play a major role in the earliest efforts of the United Farm Workers Union to achieve international recognition. So if it didn't play a role, then they're saying, you know, this work of art and theater that Valdez had told Chavez, like, use this for your political goals, it did not play a major role. We're not really sure if that's supported. If we had to guess, it probably would have been playing at least some kind of role. In trying to get them international recognition, but we just don't have enough information there. They didn't go and tell us all about the final effects. But, you know, well, we'll see. We'll see. I don't know about this one. I'll have to check that one. I've got a big question mark there. And D, although its first performers were entirely in Spanish, okay, it eventually gave some performances partially in English for the benefit of non-Spanish speaking audiences. That is not supported. We don't talk about English or Spanish, and whether, you know, who the audience are and the benefit of non-Spanish speaking audiences. That's just beyond the scope of what's supported. E, its work drew praise not only from critics in the United States, but from critics in Mexico as well. Okay, so we know that there's one critic going on here, and that's Yolanda. And Yolanda is writing a book. She, like the other critics, you know, we don't really have praise from critics in the United States or in Mexico. So for people who are stuck between E and C and who ended up picking C, you are correct. I guess we're going to go with C, and we're going to think about why it did not play a major role. Let's see, in the earliest efforts, maybe the earliest. Oh, that's the key word. The earliest efforts, you know, if we remember that these were people were trying to organize in the 60s, but, you know, it just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. And then that's when Valdez comes and approaches Chavez saying, hey, use theater, like let's partner. And that happened in 1965. So quote unquote earliest probably would have been the early 60s, like literally 1960 or 1961. That's tricky. I would have strike that out and then been really confused on this question. Any questions on number 19 before we move on to 20?
It got a little confusing for me because like they put stuff that like had nothing to do with it. So like you start overthinking yourself.
Oh yeah,
And you're like, what? Like
right. Right. I probably would have gotten to see because I was like, they definitely don't talk about anything else. This is the only one that's remotely relevant. So when you like, I think for me did not play a major role. I thought that was like a disagreement with the language. And often when we find disagreements with language, we have to kind of look and see, is there anything language specific that would mislead us rather than content? Whereas like praise from critics, content wise, that is not even present in the passage. So we just, when we're overthinking it, we think, you know, did we not like it because of language or did we not like it because of content? All right, so let's see. Number 20, the passage most strongly supports which one of the following? So we have another most strongly supports, but there's only going to be one that actually directly relates to the passage. So passage one is, paragraph one is about our context and history, why 1965 is important. 2 is about Valdez and developing the Actos. And then 3 is, you know, Yolanda making sure that we understand that it's a collective achievement from the Actos. Nikki, you've been like one of the first to respond for each one. I'm like gold star for you. Like you're very confident on these answer choices.
Sometimes confidently wrong, but confident nonetheless.
We love it though, because I think, you know, as you start to build your skill with this section, that confidence is what you're going to need to help you cut down your time. Because if you're not confident, you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you're like, I've run out of time. So take it. We'll take it because you just want to keep moving on this test. There's going to be some right answers, some wrong answers, but if you keep moving, you'll get to more questions and you have more attempts. How are we doing on this question? A couple votes for B. We got a couple votes for C. Okie dokie. Looks like it's a pretty even split so far. All right. So we did not like A, C, or D. Or wait. All right. A, D, or E. Sorry. I was like, we did like C. We like B and C. So if we look at those first, the Carpus tradition has been widely discussed and analyzed by both US and Mexican theater historians concerned with theatrical performance style and periods. Widely discussed, analyzed, both US and Mexican theater. We only really know that there's like European training coming in here. We don't really know who the historians are with. There's a lot of information in here that we just don't necessarily agree with. Let's look at D and E.
Okay, like 20 seconds, Jasmine.
Huh?
Or it's like 20 seconds, okay?
Yeah. So D, many of the earliest actos were based on scripts composed by Valdez. So we don't know necessarily the farm workers modified it, right? E, by the early 1970s, that's the apex. He was using actos on the basis for other theatrical endeavors, no longer associated. Oh, well, we don't know what happened afterward. So now we're going to C and B. So C, comedy was a prominent feature of the Chicano theater in the 1960s. So this, oh, we got some changing answer choices. This is our answer before we get shuffled around. And then when we look at why C is wrong, in directing the actos of Teatro Campesino, he went to great lengths to simulate or recreate what audiences had experienced. Well, he didn't simulate or recreate. He let them retell it themselves. So that one's a really, really tricky answer choice, but B would be our right answer. Look at that. We did it right in the nick of time.